So I've been an entrepreneur and a corporate entrepreneur. My first real entrepreneurial experience was actually inside a big company. It was about 25 years ago inside Sony when a couple of colleagues of mine and I that had worked together in the past started up a new division for Sony. We weren't inside Sony at the time, but we received a commitment for at $60 million, which in the mid 1990s was a lot of money. I mean, right now, in the age of the Vision Fund and all of that, it doesn't seem like a lot. So we had actually a pretty good runway. And our job was to launch a number of kind of new technology and branding initiatives for Sony. And if you were in my workshop yesterday, I shared a little bit about what was going on with Sony as it transitioned from being an electronics company into being a global entertainment company with things like film, television, music, and all of those areas. So there's a lot of these silos. I'm going to talk about silos a little bit today. Um, One of the areas that I ended up owning was e-commerce. And at the time, we put a website up there and we said, call our 1-800 number. And we had to figure out how to take credit cards. And it was really hard to take credit cards, if those of you remember, if anybody was involved at the time. And there were solutions out there that cost $1 million or $2 million, and they sucked. So I ended up building one myself. I pulled some really smart people together, and we built our own e-commerce solution, which it's a good thing I didn't know much about it because fortunately I had some really talented folks because it turned out it was really hard, and we built a really, really good one. And we built a good one, launched our site, launched commerce capabilities, and a number of other companies came to us and said, where'd you get that? And I said, I built it. And they go, how did you build it? I said, I have a really talented dev team. And they go, well, we want to license it. It's better than any of the other ones out there. So I went back to Sony and I said, I have a market. I have people coming to me and they're willing to pay 7 figures for this solution. And we invested less than that to actually get it functioning. And of course, Sony said, no, we're not in that business. So I said, okay, I understand. So I flew back home. And I had them coming back to me again saying, and then I had a lot of small businesses, and Amazon kind of called and said, where did you get that? So I flew back to Tokyo again, and I just said, please, please, please. And they said, no. And I said, what if I do this? What if I give you a perpetual license for $1 a year and let you use the e-commerce solution? And then I can take it out and I can continue to invest in it, and you guys will get a better e-commerce solution. And they actually said yes. So then I spun it out of Sony, took that through funding and growth. It's now inside Google. A couple acquisitions later, I wish I had sold it directly to Google. But those are things that are part of this corporate entrepreneurship experience. I kind of stumbled into that, right? I had a need. By the way, one of the big things, we spend a lot of time here talking about ideation and kind of where good ideas come from. Most of the best ideas are in 2 places. You know them already, or your line managers know them already, because they're problems you face, right? Scratch your own itch. They're problems you face. And by the way, who knows those problems better than you? I knew my problem really, really well. So it turns out at the time I was one of the experts in trying to figure out and speccing e-commerce and payment solutions for a global enterprise. I just didn't realize that. And the other place, of course, where your next venture, your next big idea comes from is your customers. Whether you're using open innovation practices, which I know some of you are, which was developed by my colleague at UC Berkeley, Hank Chesborough. Do any of you work with Hank, by the way? Yeah, so Hank's just the nicest guy and the father of open innovation. Or whether you use kind of startup practices, whether you use this concept of customer discovery. Have any of you been through customer discovery, hardcore customer discovery? We're going to do that today. So I'm going to provide a little bit of context, and we're going to do, if we do this right, 3 10-minute sprints or so. And I'm going to leave you with this workbook, which has also been uploaded, so you can have it. And there's some more tools as well. I presume most of you heard Tammy Erickson's comments this morning. I caught the back end of them. But one of the things she said that I referenced in my little teaser, which I thought was great, was that innovation is not necessarily, or these types of things, sufficiently structured, right? Entrepreneurs' desks are messy. The innovation process doesn't always have a neat path that you follow. But when we're inside organizations, that's kind of expected of us. What's the path we're going to follow? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some tools and some processes and ways to think like entrepreneurs. In fact, as I shared with you, I run these boot camps a week, 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks. Oftentimes, things that companies will say, come in and take a dozen of our executives and help them think like entrepreneurs. So I say, great, roll up your sleeves, come up with an idea, go talk to customers, prototype this, figure out your go-to-market strategy. Where's your initial target market? What's your business model? And they have to do that. And at the end of that period, they pitch me. We have a little pitch competition, just like you're pitching venture capitalists. And we assess them in the same way. One of the things that is great about this conference is you heard Mark Randall talk about Kickbox. And I've worked with Adobe and with CEO and the CMO of Adobe as well, in addition to the work that Mark has done. Because what that does is that puts a process around this front end. That includes things like some of this customer discovery where you just go out and talk to customers. So that's just a little bit of context of what we're going to do today. We're going to do three kind of sprints in each of three areas. So to say, what are the three keys to to corporate entrepreneurship? First of all, you need to act like an entrepreneur. So it's going to be entrepreneurial execution and understanding the entrepreneur's toolkit. How do entrepreneurs do this? Because we're competing with them and they're competing with us and they want our customers. Number two, how do you make sure you have strategic alignment? So you say, okay, this is a good idea, right? My e-commerce solution. Well, that was strategically aligned because we knew we wanted to launch and we needed to have that capability. So I was able to get the buy-in I needed for that. And then the third one, any of you ever have challenges managing some of your internal stakeholders? Just checking. Silos, gatekeepers, people whose business you're actually attacking with your new venture. And while on the one hand they say it's great, we should cannibalize ourselves before our competitors do, and on the other hand they say, don't take my customer, don't talk to my customer, right? So we're going to do some quick exercise. I'm going to talk through some tools on each of those. Let's go. Does that sound okay? Great. Otherwise, I don't know what I was going to do for the next hour. Right? So here's where we start. How do you improve your chances of success? How do you act like an entrepreneur? Here are the three keys. That's what we just talked about. Those are three keys. Now, typically, if we had a week together, we would unpack each of those circles in a number of different ways. So I'm going to spend about 10 minutes right now and kind of fly through some of the internal conflicts we have and some of the other tools and things, and then we're going to sprint. All right, let's go. So the first thing, innovation and entrepreneurship are different, right? Innovation, by the way, what's the difference between innovation and entrepreneurship? You guys all know what innovation is. New, better, different, creates value. What's that? Let's take that. How do you pour that into entrepreneurship? What do entrepreneurs do that's different from innovators? They bring things to the market. Great. What else do we do? Perfect. They do great with uncertainty. Awesome. What else? Much more, yeah. So, and I would say one thing. It's not just taking risks. We actually manage risk. Here's the funny thing. Everybody thinks entrepreneurs are big risk takers. Actually, the process, you come study with me for 2 weeks, the process we would go through, I will teach you how to manage risk. All right? Okay, I'm just going to take one quick detour. Let's say I decide I want to launch a new clicker company. Okay, I just shared with you I'm an experienced entrepreneur. I've had nice exits. I've raised a bunch of money. I've made money for other people. It's going to cost me $50 million to launch a new clicker company. I'm experienced. I use clickers every day, as you would expect. Who's ready to write me that check for $50 million based on what I shared with you? Tough crowd. 25. 10. $50,000. I'm going to build 3 prototypes. I'm going to go get 100 early customers that are willing to buy once I can deliver my product. And then I'm going to come back to you, and if you write me that $50,000 check and I hit those milestones, not KPIs, milestones, then you're going to write me $1 million check. How many of you would write that check today? Right? Thank you. That's the right answer, by the way. Martin. Martin's my man. You're my venture capitalist. And here's why. What did I just do? I fundamentally de-risked about 5 elements of the value proposition. First of all, I took $49,950,000 off the table. That's a big de-risking. Second of all, my prototype, my 3 prototypes are going to show you that I actually can deal with the product. I can deliver a prototype of the product. I'm not sure I can deliver it at scale yet, whatever, but I can build a product that works. So I de-risk the product side. I de-risk the market side somewhat because I just said, here's 100 customers that are willing to buy this. Right? So I just took a huge amount of risk off the table. So when you think about entrepreneurs, the risk is this huge thing. We take a lot of risk, but we also manage risk. So as corporate entrepreneurs, think about how you manage risk. And don't think about KPIs. People will tell you KPIs. Think about milestones. I didn't give you KPIs on that. I just gave you a few milestones. When I hit a milestone, my value goes up. I've taken the risk off the table. All right. Sometimes this is the arena we live in, especially in our corporate roles. Molbau, more or less business as usual. Of course, this is the world we live in, right? Molbau zone is incremental. The world we live in, the one that we're all competing in, is exponential. And that's the kind of growth curve that all of our competitors and the world is on. So we need to jump on that curve and think differently. Number 2, you guys know Crossing the Chasm and Jeffrey Moore, right? We know, oh, do I have a, let's see, hold on. Oh, I do. We know, well, not really. We know that to launch my clicker product, I'm going to start with innovators and get a few of those, but it's not until I cross the chasm into the mass market that I'm relevant to any of you here. So I have to cross that chasm from a product standpoint to get my early innovators, my early adopters and innovators to talk about it. But then I need to get them to help communicate that and expand. I need to become Apple, for example. But you have 2 chasms to cross, because before you even get there, your internal chasm you've got to cross. You're going to have to find, you need to find a few internal sponsors, whether they're line managers or corporate innovation or whomever it is. When I say you, now I'm talking to you all as people who have an idea, a concept, something you have to do, and you want to make it happen. You need sponsors. So you have 2 chasms to cross. Your job is doubly hard. Your biggest enemy is the status quo, the way we always do things here, right? But you're this inside entrepreneur. Okay, so what do you have? Sumo doesn't always win against judo, right? The Harvard business case even says that. We're faster, we're more nimble, we consume less food, we can move quickly, we can discover new markets, we can discover niches, we can enter in small markets and grow. There's a lot of things we can do because the status quo is a sure way to eventual death by 1,000 cuts unless we innovate. You guys know all this. Here's something else. And you know this too, I think. I just want to set a baseline. Startups and enterprises are different. We used to think about startups as, let's just do a small version of an enterprise. But the role of a startup is what? As a startup, there's one thing you are trying to, will survive, to do. Product market fit. That's it. What did I do? Prototype. Can I find customers? That's my job. I'm going to keep experimenting until I do that. But as an enterprise, what's your job? You already have product market fit. Your job is incremental improvement. Your job is to put up barriers to entry. It's Six Sigma. It's channels. It's barriers. It's brand. It's all the stuff that makes you really efficient at being big, but makes enterprises really bad at being small and nimble. Which is why, from a corporate entrepreneurship standpoint, we'll talk about it at the end, you don't want corporate entrepreneurs on the 17th floor between marketing and finance. You want entrepreneurs in a building across town, in a building 3 time zones away. When I did Sony, our corporate headquarters were in New York, in the US, and in Tokyo. We had a big office in LA. I launched mine in Silicon Valley. I gave myself some distance so that I didn't get sucked into all the corporate meetings on 16 and 18. Right? So you want to give yourself that entrepreneurial freedom. This is the challenge we run. I'm going to go through this briefly, right? Here we are. Here's everybody that wants us. Those of you who were in the other F word, in the failure value cycle, saw this yesterday. We need to think like these guys. Something else. The tyranny of the large denominator. So here's what I mean by that. This is what I ran into at Sony, by the way, why I eventually spun my business out. I went from $0 to $150 million in revenues in less than 5 years. I thought that was pretty good. I had a clean path to 250. Beyond that, I wasn't sure where the billion was going to come from. And you know what I realized inside Sony? Unless I had 3 commas, it didn't matter. The tyranny of the large denominator. When you're that big, you need to launch. You need to be able to have a path to big numbers. It's a problem for corporate entrepreneurs. Right? Your early impact is small. However, there's other reasons why you want to launch these. You want to discover new markets. You want to create new business cases. Here's a great reason. How many of you grow your business organically through launching new ventures? Show of hands. Not that many. How many of you grow your business through acquisition? Strategic acquisitions? A lot. How many of those acquisitions succeed every time? I know the answer to that. Okay, so what if each of those acquisitions actually already had an internal champion that wasn't in corporate development, or that wasn't brought to you by your investment bank or whatever it was, and was an internal champion that was already doing this inside but was small? But you figured out this was a strategic fit. You had culture, you had expertise, you've connected it inside the organization. Then what do you do with those acquisitions? You don't just drop them on. I've been acquired. It's been painful. Okay, a year and a day after 2 of those acquisitions, I exited because it was just painful. But if I had an internal champion that knew my business, that was in my business, that was launching businesses inside the company, I had a place, I had a home. What does that do from the standpoint of integrating culture? We all know that with acquisitions, we want to assimilate people, talent, brand, customers, technology, all of those elements. And if I have somebody that speaks my language and I have a place to bolt my acquisition on, then it's much, much better. So that little node that we just launched becomes incredibly valuable strategically. And then you flip from using the income statement to fund growth to using the balance sheet when you can do that. So think about that when you say, look, this may not be big enough, and you go, that's okay. Once we figure out this is a market we want to be in and we understand where it fits in our portfolio, let's go spend €1 billion or whatever it is to make that strategic acquisition. Does that make sense what I'm saying there? So it's really interesting because, and I've been on both, and I've acquired too, right? And I've seen, and I thought I was, after going through the hell of being acquired by a multinational, I said, I'm going to be so great when I make acquisitions when I'm on the other side. I wasn't that much better. I was more sympathetic, but it's hard, okay? All right. My classmate at UC Berkeley was Scott Adams, who writes Dilbert. So Scott's kind of a twisted guy. So here's Scott. I just want to channel it. We need to disrupt our entire industry and we need to move quickly. But check with me before you do anything. I want you to think like entrepreneurs, but not like the brave ones can do. So these are the things that we want to kind of get out of our mindset around and say, okay, let's think like entrepreneurs. Let's empower those inside entrepreneurs that are going to be able to do that. 1 or 2 more challenges, then let's get to work. You always have a challenge between today's operations and tomorrow's operations. One of the things that we looked at in kind of balancing this, my colleague John and I, in our book, The Other F Word, we called it your T to T ratio. And every part of the organization has a different T to T ratio. If you're in manufacturing, for example, your today component should be pretty big. but you still have to look at innovation for the future. But if you're in new product development, if you're in marketing, if you're doing this, you want a big part of your budget thinking and all of that being much more forward. And this is relative good news for the corporate entrepreneur, because this study came out of the Kauffman Foundation, which is one of the largest entrepreneurial research foundations. And they asked entrepreneurs, what do early stage entrepreneurs cite as their biggest business challenge? And do you know what the answer is? Everything. Okay, why is this good news for the corporate entrepreneur? And the answer is the corporate entrepreneur actually has about 3/4 of these things, if they have the right sponsorship, taken care of for them. I loved being a corporate entrepreneur. I needed offices. I called the real estate department. When I was an entrepreneur, I did not have a real estate department. I did not have a legal department. I did not have an HR department with all the forms. Every time I needed something, I had to create it, or after I did it a few times, I had my toolkit, which is kind of what I try and do for entrepreneurs and then corporate entrepreneurs. So when I teach entrepreneurship, I say, you guys try and do all of that, channeling the other F word at once, you're fucked. Because you will fail, all sorts of Fs. So what we do is we just focus on 2 or 3 things to start with. Product market fit, telling a good story, like Tammy was talking about earlier, and figuring out a business model that we think will ultimately work. Yes, I know some startups like Twitter launch, we don't know the business model, but we have lots of users, we'll monetize it later. That's a risky strategy, right? Okay. I'm going to go forward. I'm going to go through all this. I'm coming back, I promise, because I just want to start with this. So I just added this morning. Some people said, how do entrepreneurs think? Right? So I have a top 10 list that is non-scientific, but it is 15 years of curation based on my experiences. And here's what the top here's how entrepreneurs think and act. And if you want to be a corporate entrepreneur, I want you to think like this. And some of it's really hard. By the way, what do you think they are? How do entrepreneurs think and act? Risk. Beatrice said risk. Right? What else? Market needs. So focused on the market. Okay, focused on the market? Who's the market? Your customer needs, right? Okay, good. There's a huge difference, though. What else? Perseverance. Absolutely. Because stuff does not work out. What else do we think? What do we think here, guys? Determination goes with perseverance. What do we think? What's that? Motivation. Yeah, you do all of that. All right, here's the top 10. Bias to action. Entrepreneurs move fast, right? Yes, we study, we look for opportunities, but once we see an opportunity, we move quick. Number 2, it's about change. So here's one of the things I want you to think about. What change is happening in the marketplace that's going to disrupt you, right? What changes happen? What changes are we talking about? Regulatory change, trade partner change, China, Trump, big issue, right? New opportunities, especially as manufacturing moves from China to Korea, if you're whatever, things like that. Technology change. So much of the modern economy, when we look at it, could not exist until we had a sufficient platform of smartphones that enabled all of these new services, the on-demand services we have. Environmental change. I wouldn't mind being in the seawall building business in a few years. Things like that, right? So we look for those exogenous change factors, and we do that. Anybody know Mary Meeker? Yeah, on a technology side. She's a big technology analyst. Every year she comes out, she used to be at Kleiner Perkins, but every year she comes out with an Internet Trends report, which is 150 pages of really dense charts and a few key takeaways. What's trending? You guys should be looking at that stuff, because everybody's businesses, others have said, is a technology business. How many of you guys get newsletters every week from Silicon Valley about startups, about funding, about new technologies? So look for those. I have a list of my favorite 100 kind of newsletters. Anybody want it? Okay. How do I get? Oh, good. how do I get these guys a list of my favorite 100 newsletters? It's like some of them are lists of lists. Can I just send it? It's a document. I'll find a way. I'll find a way. Okay, great. Change. Optimistic. Of course. Yes, we know we fail a lot, but we believe we're going to succeed because nobody fails a cynic or a pessimist. We deal really well with uncertainty, and that's really hard, and that's really hard on the corporate side, right? Because there's never perfect information, especially in emerging and changing markets. We can, by the way, we make decisions in times of uncertainty. For me, the first time around as an entrepreneur, that was one of the hardest things. I don't have the information. You got to make a choice. We're very resourceful, mostly because we don't have resources. We're intensely curious. Yes, sir? By resourceful? So we figure out ways to do it for free, for cheap, right? We hack our way to growth. It's like, famously, Airbnb, how did they were dying when they started out. They hacked Craigslist, and everybody used to post on Craigslist when they had a room in their home to rent. Somehow Airbnb scraped Craigslist and spammed everybody there. We just find ways to do that. That was their growth hack. So really curious, back to the points that we're talking about, right? We understand and manage risk, talked about that. We're savvy around failure because we are going to fail a bunch. So we fail little fails and we extract wisdoms every time because what's the job of a startup? Experimentation to find product market fit. Hypothesis testing, experimentation. We know our customer really, really well. We talk to our customers. Sometimes I have people that, CEOs or whatever, that say, I have a market research firm for that. I go, no, you got to go talk to your customers. You have to go talk to your customers. You guys, if you want to be a corporate entrepreneur, you got to go talk to customers. For my entrepreneurs, they have to do 100 customer interviews personally before they can come back and tell me what their idea is. And the customer interviews are not about, will you buy this? It's tell me how you're solving this problem. And then, you guys have seen this one before, but we're not really good with permission. We just ask for forgiveness. That's sometimes hard inside corporates. Those are my top 10. Jeff Bezos now. But I did love this. So when we talk about Bezos, I was just doing some research and I came across this as a meme. And so Bezos is incredibly customer centric, but I just love that. This was not my slide, I just borrowed it. It's like, I don't know, is he on a big game safari somewhere in 2017? Okay. Now I'm going to go back. How do we get alignment? We're going to do this one super fast. Here's my question to you. Do you want me to give you... Oh, I'm not going back that far. Do you want to work on your own? Or do you want me to give you one that we can work on at the table? Was that give you one? Okay, I'm going to give you one. If, as a table, you say, well, I'm thinking of something, can I convince the table to work on it? Just don't ask for permission, just do it, right? Because that's what the spirit of what we're doing here. All right, let's come up with one. Apple's investigating a number of new markets. We know that they're taking a look at the automotive market. We know that they're taking a look at the healthcare market. They decide they want to get involved. Somebody inside Apple says, let's get into the drone marketplace. And you can decide what kind of drone it is. Is it a consumer drone? Is it a delivery drone? Is it what? But Apple says, the drone marketplace is going to be huge. We want to deliver an Apple experience and an Apple product for the drone marketplace. Apple drones. I Googled that, by the way, before I suggested it, just to make sure that it wasn't actually a super secret a project. If it is, it's a super secret project, and it'll be fun for us to see what we come up with. So the idea, the concept that's handed down, and this is, by the way, this is a solution, not a problem. So now we're going to figure it out, is do we want to enter, how do we think about entering the drone marketplace? Now, Apple is somewhat famous for this. When Steve Jobs invented the Macintosh, you know what he did? He got a separate building, He put the pirate flag, he ran it up, he said no corporate types allowed, he put his own team in place, and he isolated them just to work on that. So that's what we're going to do. So we have the pirate flag above our building, wherever it is we want to do it. So here's my question. How do we drive strategic alignment? There's a lot of elements that go into this. If we had a few days, we would talk about strategy and culture. By the way, what wins? Culture. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? As has famously been said many times. We would take a look at where we are now. Super simple. Most of my frameworks are pretty simple. Who's our customer now and what are our products? And then how do we extend into new markets, into new products, and eventually selling new products to new customers? As you look at a product progression, and some of you probably chart this, jumping diagonally is really hard. Jumping diagonally means you're completely leaving either markets you know or customers that or products you have. So if you've not done a lot of this, move horizontally in either direction and then navigate into the upper right-hand quadrant. Really simple, powerful tool. And there are different ways that various people have indicated it, but the simple 2x2. Here's the alignment question. The first thing you do, open your book. In our very first spread here, this is an example of how we would fill it out on the very top. On the bottom, you can see I've left the 8 pie charts, slices of the pie open. So the first thing you want to think about is what are the 8 strategic factors that are most important for Apple or for the project leaders here vis-a-vis the corporate Apple. Is it brand? Is it execution capability? Is it business model? Think about what those are at the table. Just kind of check them off. There aren't that many more than 8 that I have as examples. And fill in the 8. I'm going to give you 2 minutes, just really quick, to say, what do we think? If I'm launching this, where do I need to align strategically? And then I'll come back. So go ahead. One of you act as kind of the master scribe on this, and the rest of you start to say, what are the strategic elements we are going to have to align around? All right, let's come back because we have a couple more that I want to do. Shh. I love it. I love it, and we need to. Should we try and use the little catch box if we can for the purposes? All right. Why do we do this? By the way, how many of you came across different pieces of the pie that you said, oh, I think this could be aligned with Apple's vision, strategy, whatever? How many had some parts of the pie that they thought it would be pretty aligned? Great. What was that?
It's actually the Apple Watch. Sorry, yeah. We were discussing actually not dying as a service, we call it. Right. So you can leverage all the devices that are already around there.
Right.
And what they capture about you. So they know when something is wrong with you, and you can leverage all of that.
Got it. Well, and the other thing too is with all the devices, maybe you have all these control systems.
Yeah.
Right. You can do it with your watch, with your phone, you can talk to Siri, you can do whatever. So maybe you actually have a built-in set of control systems. So there's some areas where you say, oh, I think that we have some strategic fit. The whole idea behind this, and we're not going to go into it in much more detail, is to get you thinking about where you have fit, where you think you have fit in the organization, and where you go, oh shit, I think I'm going to have an issue here. One of our groups, and we'll come right back to you. Oh, let's start with Martin, then I want to go back to this table.
Yeah, what was actually interesting is we started about thinking, yeah, Apple is going to build drones. And during the discussion, we ended up as like, no, that's not what we are going to do. We have services that would be very nice to combine with all the guys building drones because they need something that they're used for.
Okay, we're coming back to you because
That was brilliant.
you're stealing, no, because you're stealing what may come next, right? Okay, no, which is great. I hadn't even thought of this. This is what's great about doing these things. Ready, guys? Here it comes. All right. You came up with something, which I think was good, which was what?
Now we were thinking of regulatory.
Yeah, you said regulatory. So where does that fit? Do we have any capabilities in regulatory when it comes to drones? No. However, do we have capabilities in regulatory? Keep going. So then the question is, strategic fit or not? Where are you on that?
We said no strategic fit, except that Apple maybe complains a lot against regulatory. So
Yeah, so they have a regulatory affairs unit or whatever that would be. So the wrong regulatory, but at least they have some competencies in that might be able to transition. So there's a lot of elements there that we can start to look at. And what this tells you, somebody said, well, how do I use this as a before and after radar chart? And it's not. You fill in the levels of the pie. If you think it's a good strategic fit, that whole piece of the slice of pie is black or red or whatever your color is. If it's poor, just a little slice of pie. And the way that we do that, the reason we do that, is then we go have conversations with all those different stakeholder groups and say, are we aligned or not? And then a whole lot is going to come out of that even before you start. Okay, let's say that we do this. Let's move forward. So we go, all right, aligned, not aligned, but we're moving forward with this. Now we have to decide. We can build out our portfolio of projects. There's all sorts of things to do, but we're going to do our second sprint. Now, we talked about what great entrepreneurs do, how they think, and right, we talked about kickbox before. Now, the question is, will our customers, our target customers, do they have a problem? How do I define a customer? Somebody who has a problem, is seeking a solution, is willing to pay, and is able to pay. You all probably have similar definitions. So when you go talk to those potential customers, as we started to define them, before pitching them our solution, what are we going to ask them about? What's their problem? Right? What problems are we solving? And for whom? We found him. Now we're going to go talk to him. We think we're solving his problem. Are we solving it with a drone? Or, as these guys said, maybe we're solving it with a suite of solutions that helps empower everybody else's drones. Wouldn't that be interesting? Or a branded solution with others, a licensed solution. We do things that we figure out who our persona is. We understand the customer life cycle really well, right? Come do this for a couple of months and we'll talk about the entire customer life cycle, the pre-purchase, purchase, and post-purchase cycle. Entrepreneurs really get in and understand that. We prototype. We use the business model canvas. We know how to tell stories. This is where I want to go. Now, but we have to go talk to customers. So here's what I want you to do. We're not pitching a drone. We have a hypothesis that we want to go into the drone business. We haven't defined that yet. Go to your next page. And this is why you might want to take the other one if you've written on yours, because you won't be able to see through the ink. And interviews, there's a number of guidelines about them. But let me tell you the 2 or 3 things. You're not pitching your customers your product. You're asking them how they solve their current problems or needs. Do you already have a drone? Do you want a drone? Is it business to business or business to consumer? What are the challenges that you have? What are the challenges you have with your current products? What would you like to see? It's always dangerous, right? But understanding their challenges. So take 5 minutes and start to build a couple of questions. Each of you should do this on your own right now, and then we'll compare. Write down 3 or 4 questions. If you were to go find a potential customer for your products, what questions would you ask them about their problem, not about their solution? Go. A great place to start is asking them how they meet those needs today and what they're frustrated about. Great question here. Do we focus on everybody or do we identify some early targets? And the answer is you can't focus on everybody. So you start with some hypothesis customers because you've observed something that says this is a business we should be in. And once you have those conversations, you might actually confirm or not confirm that this is a target customer for you. This is great. I see everybody has a few questions, so I'm going to break in. How many of you could keep asking questions, writing down questions for the next 15 minutes? And as you start asking questions, don't they beg more questions? All right, where's our box? Perfect. Who has a question that they like among their list that they want to share? They can't all suck. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Sebastian. By the way, this is where you never know when you start asking questions where they're going to lead. Go ahead.
So one question I had was, how do you feel when a drone is hovering above you?
Okay, now I don't know where that's going to go, but that's pretty cool, right? Okay, good. Let's have 1 or 2 more at this table. You guys look at your table. Once we go to a table, we're going to see if there's a few more. Guido, you have one? Yeah.
Well, very, very broad. What is your biggest problem of today? So
Keep going. What's your biggest problem today with?
How do you solve this problem with your own means? And if you have a wish-free, how would you solve it, and how much money would you put into it?
Got it. So one of the questions, right, if you look, I mean, there's a lot. How badly do you want this problem solved, right?
Yeah.
Is it a problem that you don't have drones? Is it a problem that the drones suck? Is it a problem that you need a commercial drone? You need more range? What is it you need, right?
Well, why should you start already with a drone?
Oh, very good.
I'm not sure about this, because maybe it's not a drone. Maybe we come out and it's a car,
Yeah, it
not a
could
drone,
be.
which would be much better fit.
You're better. I love it. Okay, toss me this. Who's got another one? Yes, sir. Ready? These are light, so if you haven't caught them yet.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right. So I will not ask the customer for problem, but I have an assumption that he might use the drone as a solution for making movies or photos. That's
Right.
my assumption. So basically, I will ask what and how are you use your camera actually for, and what would you like to use it extendedly? So
Got
just
it.
to
So
get
you have you're focused on a particular need,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
great. You're
Yeah.
saying, look, I'm going to start here.
Yeah.
What happens if they say, actually, I have some needs?
Yeah.
Then you pursue. If they say
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
that's good.
I basically try to get rid of my impression I will sell a drone, because the drone is a technical solution.
Right.
Yeah. And the other question would be, so for example, people are handling these camera sticks. I
Right.
personally hate them. Yeah. So in which way does your selfie stick hinder you in making the photos or videos you like to do? And that's a very open question, and the customer might talk half an hour. on
Perfect, right. What are the solutions you use to actually move your camera further than your arm allows?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is what this up. Perfect. Who has another question at this table?
I think what you could add here is asking.
You need the box, Rob.
Thanks. Sorry,
That's why I know. I'm just saying. They're telling me. They're saying use the box.
I'll do. So I think it would be nice to know what is hindering in the solution that they're already using, but also you need to know what is good. Because that's already the reason why they would use it in the
Yeah,
first
what do
place.
you like and what don't you like? Exactly. So that's the key thing. I love that, because then you can say, what can we do that builds on what works where there's something wrong? Perfect. So now you guys have been better than I was at being really open-ended. Who has one more? Peter.
I was thinking, what do you like doing during the day, and what do you not like, and where could you have an extra pair of hands help you?
Okay,
And
now
maybe the
now we're just thinking broader, right? Do you need an automated assistant? Do you need whatever? Okay, good. So one of the key things is, so think more broadly, right? What are tasks you have that you can't handle well today? Now, do you want to ask where automation might help or not? I don't know. This is where we want to be open-ended, right? And this is where asking these open-ended questions, and a couple of you caught me on it, which was great, will lead you to different ways. And the fascinating thing, you start with a hypothesis. Sometimes you need to start somewhere, and then you're going to move based on what you learn. But you have to have those conversations. And entrepreneurs know, the CEOs know, that they have to go have those conversations. You identify a prospective target customer, you go talk to them, and you figure that out. Typically after about 10 or 15, if you have a pretty good idea, after about 10 or 15 interviews, if you've targeted the right people, for those of you who have done it, you start to see patterns emerge. Sometimes you don't see patterns emerge until 50. But you almost always do by then. And you want to do some, and you want your teammates to do some, so everybody hears directly from the customers, so that you're being motivated by the customers, not one guy that says, we're going to build an Apple drone. And this is it. Okay? Before we move on, more thoughts? Yes, sir. Rob. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering now. So we're going in this direction given by the sample you're presenting here, but a lot of the questions that I have actually cannot be answered by going to 50 customers. We have a very selected group of customers, maybe just a handful, which are very maybe shy or for other reasons don't want to share everything they know, which would help me to come up with the right product.
You're talking about in your particular business, right?
Yeah, so not in general, let's say not particularly mine, but in general, if the market is much smaller,
right,
and if more is at stake, so how do you deal with that? Because then this doesn't work.
Well, so there's a few things. Number one, if the market's small, or let's say you're in a business-to-business mode, who do your business customers sell to? So one of the things is you can start to think through the entire process and say, how do we do that? Otherwise, sometimes inside your customers, and you have to figure it out, there are a number of stakeholders that you can speak with. And sometimes you're not going to get. In some of these situations, it's easier to look at this when you talk about consumer applications than it is business-to-business applications, but it's just as relevant. Your numbers may not be quite as big. And this is where you need to have those deeper customer conversations. That's a great question. I don't have an easy answer, and part of it is there's not an easy answer for that in B2B where you've got 5 customers. This is where you have customer intimacy, and you need to really drive that. All right. There's one more thing one more mini little sprint we want to talk about, which is the fun part. Oh, a couple things. So early in the process, as you start, let's say you've now identified the kind of product you want to build, you've talked to customers, you've built a bit of a roadmap. Do you aim small or big? Your objectives need to remain really big, but your milestones need to be small. Not KPIs, but milestones. Talked to 50 customers, built our first prototype, got our first preliminary orders, built a minimum viable product, got proof of concept, whatever those are, because that's really important. Those of you who know kind of about psychology of organizations and organizational design, this is from John Kotter, who wrote Heart of Change, etc., out of Harvard. Really great on organizational design and change management. Small wins from a psychological standpoint inside the organization are huge because they do a number of things. First of all, everybody on your team is able to celebrate small wins, right? So you get lots of small celebrations. What are ones I like? Really, really important for me is if you have cynics that are sitting on the wall that might want you to fail, and there will always be those, you undermine their power with those small wins. It also gives you an opportunity much more frequently to communicate and keep your executives engaged. And when you communicate, your communications should be short, they should be punchy. They should talk about hit this milestone. If you have an issue or a question, you should ask for that assistance. You have to be careful about that. But you should communicate frequently and succinctly. Because what happens? People say, you know that drone project that Coopersmith over there was doing that we were sure was going to fail? wow, in the last 6 months, I've gotten 5 emails from him, and in each instance, he's knocked down some basic milestones. He's showing the market exists. He's got a proof of concept. He got funding for his next stage. He's got this. And what that does is that starts to build momentum, because entrepreneurs make things real as fast as possible. But give it a brand name. Give it a project name. What do we want to call our Apple drone? Project what? I don't know. It could be of course, it could be iDrone, or it could be Project. Who was the guy with the wax wings that flew too close to the sun? Icarus, right, or Project Icarus, something ambitious, right? And it's like, it's got a name, it's got sponsorship, you make it real, and you don't call it Project X. You don't call it Project X, that is actually where we've got 26 KPIs and we're managing, because the moment you do that, you've kept yourself anchored and you want to build momentum. That's what entrepreneurs do, right? Okay, finally, stakeholders. Okay. How do you get the right stakeholders on board? The first thing you need to do, we'll turn this into a conversation as we're running out of time, but we'll take a look at, but I want you to, turn to the next one, just because we're going to see, let me see which, perfect. So the first thing you do is you say, okay, who are the key stakeholders for this? And when you think about stakeholders, you all know who they are. It's finance, it's marketing, it's who? For an Apple drone project, who would you need to get on board to make this happen? And think about your strategic alignment chart. You'd need marketing, of course, in one way or another. We're going to need manufacturing. Design, absolutely. Regulatory and legal, big issues there. You probably would need, you're going to need the board on, you're going to have to figure out how to get to the board on that. So build that list. Build that list of the 10 or 15 people that are the most important. And by the way, with you and your team, at the very beginning, and you build that list, and nobody knows anybody in regulatory, just start to make that outreach, right? You want to start to socialize these things well before you have an ask. That's what entrepreneurs do as well. We'll start to socialize that we're over here, we're doing this, we want to let you know what we're up to, we're going to come back, but you socialize in advance. Then what you do is you map these stakeholders, and you're making assumptions. Who's your stakeholder? How important are they? Do you think they have a lot of influence over this decision? Are they a gatekeeper? Right? How much do you think they support this? By now you started to have conversations. And I'll show you what we're going to do with the level of support and the level of power or influence. How do they define success? So what would success be for marketing, for regulatory, for brand? Right? Because you want to make sure when you have this conversation that you ask this question. You guys use WIFM a lot? You always want to know what the other person's WIFM is. Right? You want to know what would make them happy, because you want to try and align what you're doing with their WIFM. Is it sales? Is it brand? Is it customer intimacy? Is it what? Is it entering new markets? Is it meeting the need of a key strategic partner? What's their WIFM? And once you've started to outline this, you don't always have to come back to your dashboard, but go through the exercise, you and your team, and do it. Because then what you do is you map them on this. Has anybody used this before? It's so powerful, right? Because you're going to figure, so who has a high degree of support and a high level of influence? Well, what do you do with them? Wouldn't it be great if there was a color-coded map that would show you how to communicate to them and what to do with them? And this is it. You figure out who's in each quadrant, and your communication strategies are going to be slightly different. You're going to manage your stakeholders. Obviously, in the upper right, these are your big and most valuable supporters. You're going to closely maintain support. You're going to communicate what's doing. And if you need a favor, you don't over borrow, but you will use them, right? If they're low level of influence, but they're high support, you're going to keep them informed, and you actually want to make them more important in the process. And you can see what you do from there. But what this does is once you map who your key stakeholders are and where they fit in this, then you can start to try and move them around. And you know what? As much as we all want to be collaborative and we want to be good corporate partners, if I want my venture to succeed and I have 3 or 4 people who have a high degree of influence and they do not support me, how do I deal with them? Do I try and extend the olive branch? Do I try and convince them? They're never going to, let's say my product is going to cannibalize their P&L. Not going to happen. I have to actually reduce their influence. Not in a mean way, I just have to try and take them out of the equation because that's the way I'm able to do this. All right. Communicate regularly and succinctly. Your team. You want people you've worked with before. You ideally, yes, you need the expertise, but you want a couple of people that you've worked with before because you guys move, you all know this. With people you've worked with well, you move faster. You don't have to work things out quite as much, and as a corporate entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur, you want to move fast. Location. You want your own location if you can do it. Oh, by the way, the other one on team, always invite some people from corporate in because they don't want you to think you're a total renegade. Just pick carefully and they'll communicate back. Location. You want to pick the right location where you have enough independence. And if you can, you want to be near your customers. Sometimes that's on a continent. Sometimes that's what city you want to be in. And funding. Funding, you want to focus. You're not going to necessarily get all $60 million committed up front like I do. Right? You might get the $100,000 or $1 million. So make additional funding where you can, contingent on hitting milestones. Identify milestones, especially early on, where you're pretty confident you're going to hit those. That's what we do as entrepreneurs. It's not called sandbagging, you know, the American term, right? But you want some milestones where you're pretty sure you're going to do it so you can actually build that early momentum quickly out of the gate and give yourself a little bit of that runway and be successful. And then it's going to be all about execution. So this is a way that we take the kind of entrepreneurial approach and adapt it to apply these same types of tools, the ones that Mark Randall and Kickbox and others were talking about early on in ideation, and make it work inside the enterprise. So here's what I would say. I'm going to go ahead and get you all, or you, if anybody's interested. Actually, let me make sure. Anybody want that list of Silicon Valley, whatever? Perfect. I will append it to this, so I will upload that again in the next day or so. I'm running for a flight right now, but I will append it and get it so that you'll have that list. It's always great. That way you wake up in the morning and you see all sorts of exciting new stuff. So I'll do that. And there are a number of tools on my personal website around entrepreneurship, customer discovery. All of these things are my favorite innovation and entrepreneurship books. So I've got about 40 of them there. So if you're curious about what I read and what I recommend, it's all right there. Thanks. This was really fun.
So 30 seconds. What about if I am being appointed to launch an experiment on corporate entrepreneurship, which is the thing that tomorrow I should do or must do, and the thing that I shouldn't do at all?
Okay. So if somebody says you need to do, by the way, do I hand you a project that says I want you to launch this clicker?
No, it's more in general. I mean, it's more vague.
Okay,
Well, let's
so somebody,
give it a try.
Yeah.
Let's do an experiment on
On
fund your own startup in the company. Basically.
so for me, one of the things that frustrates me, and I know it's a challenge here, is when people say, let's do startups. And they go, great, we're going to do ideation, we're going to do divergence and convergence. We're going to come up with all of these ideas. It's like, I would start with what's a problem that we are facing inside the company, the example I gave about a need I had, or that we keep hearing from our customers again and again, that they say, you guys have to fix this. And sometimes it's a process change, but sometimes there's a big opportunity there. So I would start with a problem, not an initiative or an ideation. That's the one thing that I would do. And if they say, and we need it by this date, you say, I'm going to do everything I can, but it's like, I need a runway to identify the big problem, the big, hairy problem. I call those the migraine problems. You may have heard that too, like a headache that won't go away, not a little one. That's a perfect way to finish. Thank you. All right. If anybody has questions, come see me right now, but I'll be brief because I'm sprinting for the plane in just a few minutes.